purely for the benefit of time, I'm just going to read a quick comment that I left to somebody a few days ago to briefly summarise my issue that I've taken with Nicola Thin-Lips and the so-called independence movement. And it's nothing I haven't said before. So that said, wanting independence and wanting to stay in Europe are two different things and two different issues. In 2015 and 2016, they won back-to-back elections due to upset over the 2014 referendum. That clearly indicates support for independence and reinforces the belief it was rigged. Now, whether you believe it was rigged or not, it's up to yourself. Some do, some don't. Anyway, you don't lose an independence referendum then go on to win the way that they did. Nicola Thin-Lips clearly saw it that way. She explicitly told the bulk of her independence supporting voters that if they voted to leave the EU, then the premise for any second independence referendum wouldn't arise. So the only sensible and logical vote was to remain in Europe. Her words, not mine. So how much of that 62% voted to remain in the EU and how many voted going by what she said? Who knows, but she doesn't care. But here's the laugh of it all. Had the UK voted to stay in Europe, there wouldn't be any talk of a second referendum, further proving it's nothing to do with independence, but it doesn't stop her hijacking the movement. My problem is and has been with how she's taken support for independence and deliberately muddied the water to conflate it with rejoining Europe. Her winning an election, promising a second referendum, quote unquote, doesn't indicate support for Europe. Her idea of a second independence referendum does, however, mean leaving the UK to rejoin Europe. So, the narrative that we keep being told, or they love to spew out whenever they get any airtime, is that we were promised the only way to stay in Europe was to vote to remain in 2014. A great, quick and easy way to blow that argument out of the water is ask them how they voted. Because if they voted to leave in 2014, it stands to reason that they would have been voting to leave the European Union as well. But they claimed to have that one covered. Albeit, it's very weak, their response. They claim that we would have been either one of two responses. They'll either say that we would have been able to remain part of the EU, inheriting the UK's membership, lie number one of course, and the second one was we would have immediately entered negotiations to get back into Europe. Anyhow.
So our task is to persuade a majority of people in Scotland to choose independence. I want to focus today on the work we need to do to persuade that majority that independence is the right and the best choice, and how...
You're not independent in the European Union. And even if you want to make the argument that you're not sovereign, so what good is independence when you don't have sovereignty?
In the process of doing that, we will secure a right to choose it in a referendum. Of course, people do have differing views on whether or not Scotland should be independent. But the case for us having the right to make that choice is overwhelming. As of 11 p.m. tonight, the UK that Scotland voted to remain part of in 2014.
See, there she goes again, trying to imply that we voted to stay in the UK in 2014 due to being part of the EU. Everybody knew there was the potential of an EU referendum in the pipeline. She herself acknowledges this. You know, it's not a secret. Thin-Lips, Independent Scotland would have to apply for EU membership. And of course, we've got Independent Scotland would have to reapply to the EU. During her speech, she highlighted her deep concerns about Prime Minister David Cameron's plan for a referendum and UK membership of the EU after 2015. People were aware. Nonetheless,
UK inside the EU will no longer be a reality. The status quo that a majority voted for will no longer exist. There will be a material change in the circumstances that prevailed in 2014.
To a degree, I disagree with this because we technically are supposed to leave the European Union today, but we don't officially, or until the end of the year. Anything can happen between now and then. It's not set in stone. However,
leaving the EU is a fundamental change in Scotland's constitution. The consequences of that will be significant, even if they are not all felt immediately. Right now, Scotland does not have the powers to mitigate many of these consequences, let alone avoid them altogether. And the UK government has shown no interest at all in finding ways to accommodate our distinctive views and interests. Take the vital issue of migration. On Monday, I published proposals that would, in a post-Brexit world, and within current constitutional arrangements, allow Scotland to address our distinctive population challenge.
Well, and you've not been able to do that as part of the European Union, no? In all the years you've been in governance, all the years Alex Salmond was in governance, all the years since the Scottish Parliament's inception, you've never been able to mitigate these issues. All the years the UK's been part of the EU, you've not been able to entice enough people over here to sort out these demographic challenges. These demographic challenges, of course, have been brought about by the social engineering. Demographic challenges that are only going to worsen thanks to thin lips with the bowl cut and our shitty hair gel and mascara, who loves to implement feminist ideology into the curriculum to brainwash as many children as possible with a curriculum for excrement. Don't sit there and talk about concerns over demography and then blame Brexit. Because for all the years you've been part of the European Union, you weren't able to rectify these issues. There's no incentive to coerce Scottish families to even think about having children. Oh, no. The real key in all this is they want devolved immigration powers so they can attract internationally, or international migration. And we all know who that encompasses. I'm sick hearing this lie.
These proposals have significant support from across Civic Scotland and the business community.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
And yet, within hours, and with no consideration whatsoever, they were dismissed out of hand.
Because it's nonsensical.
Fewer people able to come to Scotland to live and work.
Again, you've been part of the EU for how long? How long has Scotland been part of the EU? How long has Scotland been, quote unquote, benefiting from EU freedom of movement? I know you want to blame Brexit, you want to blame leaving the European Union for demographic challenges.
Risks a working age population going into decline.
Well, why don't you do something
that
about
means
that,
fewer people available to do the jobs that need done in our private businesses and public sector, including our National Health Service.
All part of the globalist plan.
And it means fewer people paying the taxes that we need to fund these public services.
Less people, less strain on the services.
It means an economy stagnating, not growing, and Scotland not reaching our full potential.
I thought we had to focus less on GDP.
That is just one way in which we know already, and with certainty, that the folly of Brexit, coupled with the deaf ear of Westminster, will damage Scotland's prosperity and our well-being.
I'm sure you're doing a good job of damaging Scotland yourself.
And as will become stark in the months ahead, that will not be the only consequence of Brexit that will be harmful to Scotland. Now, exactly how Brexit will develop beyond tonight is not yet certain. Negotiations about the terms and nature of the UK's new relationship with the EU haven't started yet. New cliff edges have been created by the UK government, and a devastating no-deal outcome at the end of the transition remains possible. Now, for my part, I hope that that future relationship will be a close one, and I will do all I can to encourage that.
Oh, I know.
But be under no illusion. All of the signs from this Tory government are that instead of cooperation and close relationships, they are heading for divergence and deregulation.
Good.
What that will mean in the future for workers' rights and environmental protection, for the shape of our economy and the very nature of our society will be profound. And while I am certain that this will be of little interest to a Tory government, the impact will be felt most by those who already have the least, the vulnerable and the poor.
Don't even get me started.
So we know that change is coming, but it does not have to be the change that the Tories want to impose on Scotland. A new independence referendum will put the decision about the best path for Scotland into our own hands.
Nicola Sturgeon has predicated her whole campaign on obtaining an independence referendum to simply leave the UK to rejoin Europe. Now, surely, if it was all about putting the ability of choice into the hands of the Scottish people, the option should be there for the people to decide whether or not they wish to go back into Europe. Why have you taken that choice away from them? Why is the choice, do you wish to stay part of the UK or do you wish to leave it to rejoin Europe? This thin-lipped cow has taken that ability of choice away from the Scottish people because this is what she wants. Yes, there will be some that have the same ideology as her or political views as her and wish to remain part of the European Union, but don't sit there and masquerade as an independence movement. Don't sit there and bullshit the public. Don't sit there and lie and make out this is about independence, because it's not. It's simply leaving the UK to rejoin Europe. As my comment on that video said, we would not be talking about independence had the UK voted to stay in Europe. There wouldn't be any talk of a second referendum, further proving it's nothing to do with independence.
And there is a cast iron mandate from both the public and from the Scottish Parliament for that referendum. The SNP has now won 3 successive parliamentary elections on the commitment to give people the choice.
That's a lie. You've won your 2016 and 2015, as I've already stated in that comment prior. That was an upset from the 2014 referendum. 2017 they lost a third of their seats. And as for the election just passed, they spent the whole campaign talking about the right of Scottish people to choose. They're going to push through a Section 30 order paper. And as predicted, it was rejected. They were told it would be rejected prior, but it didn't stop them running on that campaign pledge. Not only that, all the support they obtained from their election just passed, they claimed that that indicates people wish to remain part of the European Union. And isn't it funny now how the polls, for the first time, are apparently showing support for independence? And the reason it's been given as to how that's come to be is that people that wish to remain part of the European Union have now switched to the SNP. But we've been led to believe up until now that every election win indicates support for the European Union, suggesting that they're all a bunch of EU fanboys. So how can it be possible that only now EU supporters are shifting the tides of the polls? Anyhow.
Voice. And this week, the Scottish Parliament has endorsed that position. That the Tories are trying to block a referendum only shows their contempt for democracy in Scotland.
Democracy. This is coming from the woman who was driving around Scotland in a Stop Brexit bus. This is the woman whose right-hand chupcake man down in Westminster spends all day long talking about independence in one hand and then spends the rest of his time talking about trying to stop Brexit, whether it be the court cases with Chupcake Cherry, whether it be the People of Scotland routine from Beta Blotford, banging on and on and on about ways to stop no deal or as much delays as possible, trying their damnedest to stop the whole process. They're in no position to stand there and talk about democracy, you know, and it's not like I didn't predict this stuff as previously mentioned. This idea of requiring permission removes responsibility and redirects the blame elsewhere. So if they're unable to fulfill this promise, they essentially get to walk away from it all scot-free. Pardon my non-intentional pun. Voting for them in this election will not do a damn thing apart from ensure that they retain and obtain power. I mean, think about it. Just think about it. You all vote for Thin Lips. They then obtain a majority again, only to see their request denied. The SNP would then have the power that they were initially after, while the anger generated from heartbroken promises and deceit are redirected down south towards Westminster.
I think somewhat counterproductively for them, it serves to illustrate just how unequal this supposedly equal union is. And we should also remember this. Fundamentally, the Tory position is a sign of weakness, not of strength. If they had any confidence at all in the argument for the Westminster Union, they would have no problem with the people of Scotland having the right to choose. It is the...
That is rather childish. Reverse psychology. Or an attempt at it anyway. But anyway.
fear of defeat that is making them so desperate to deny Scotland the choice. And we should draw great encouragement from that. What we in the independence movement must not do.
Independence movement. Just shut the fuck up, you thin-lipped cow. Nicola Sturgeon urges yes supporters to be patient on second quote-unquote independence referendum. Despite previously giving the impression she had a plan to overcome the UK government's resistance, Thin Lips said there was no shortcuts or clever wheezes. So, wouldn't you know, All that BS during the run-up to the election. And for what? She asked supporters not to give in to impatience and frustration. No, redirect that impatience and frustration down south. Yes. Her speech, which will have disappointed many of her party members because she's a liar, and yes, supporters, led to a furious backlash on one of the most powerful pro-independence websites. Wings Over Scotland called her the betrayer, amongst other things. Thin Lip said she wants indie ref, quote quote, in late 2020, citing SNP gains in the general election as proof of her mandate. Boris Johnson has refused to grant Holyrood the power, which she was told would happen prior to the election. She was told by both of them. She was told by Jeremy Corbyn as well. Saying the no vote at 2014 was a once-in-a-generation decision. In a speech to activists, Thin Lips acknowledged many of her supporters would be frustrated. Of course, but she knew this was going to happen. For me to pretend there are no shortcuts or clever wheezes that can magically overcome the obstacle we face, which you knew was there prior. My job is to offer a path that can deliver independence. It's not independence in the European Union. To achieve independence temporarily, a referendum, whenever it happens, whether it is this year, as I want, or after the next Scottish election, must be legal and legitimate. This is a simple thought. And all she's going to do in the run-up to the 2021 election is use all this frustration to bolster her argument and gain support. So admittedly, there will be some out there that are pissed off, but you have to question their intelligence level, because it was an inevitability that this was going to occur. She's a liar.